Good evening, everyone. I'm John O'Loughlin, and welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives, and well, one of the things I live for is the Thursday night trio. It's TNT. I mean, what could be more exciting than an hour here with these two great thinkers, George Webb and Professor Hamamoto? And George has brought a
Task Kitty.
guest along.
Task Kitty. Yeah.
Task Kitty. Okay, Task Kitty's here along with
the ferret.
This is Peter Daszak, the magic ferret.
Okay, well, that's quite a handle for a ferret. But you know, is that where ferritin comes from, George? Ferrets?
You know what? The play on words has not escaped me. So maybe. There you go.
It could be. Oh boy. Well, you guys know what I've been doing. I've just had my head in the computer and you know, banging away at trying to get some sensible text down so that when Andy gets here tomorrow, we'll be ready to put some images and lay out the text. And my goodness, it would be a miracle, but I think we might get some books printed by Sunday at least. So I'm looking forward to everything this weekend, seeing people. I know a lot of folks have arrived this evening and probably watching the show. So let me say hi to Kathy Sue and to Deborah. And to everyone else that's come along. I'll be looking forward to seeing all of my friends and my new friends that I haven't met yet.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Now, John, I had a show on earlier, an hour before, and I didn't give anything away, but I did tell them that I got the first draft of your manuscript. And I just told them, man, it's all there. It's in the grooves. So
Cool.
it's going to be a good one.
Well, you saying that means a lot to me, Professor. I know you've got the the scars of battle against the old computer, you know, where you have to type and type and type, and you just have to stay there. You can't get up. Like, I want to leave. No, you stay. You're right. George, I don't know how you do it. You're a totally special case. You've churned out over 20 books in the last year, and your book about my dad, by the way, I've said it before, I'll say it again. You did a fabulous job. And, you know, the material that George has turned up is just incredible. And it stands as a great book on its own. It's also got wonderful pictures and the references to many of our current events and the events of the past 50, 60 years. Are brought together in my dad's life by George, and that's what it's been. It's been teamwork with George Webb, and I'm probably one of the luckiest people in the world to have such an amazing partner in researching. After 50 years later, to put together, you know, what went on that you know, really caused my dad's early death back in 1971. So. George Webb, I thank you, and I think you've done a fabulous job with your book, and I appreciate it. I appreciate all the fellowship we've had together, and look forward to doing some more. So we'll get down here this weekend as soon as you can, and I look forward to maybe hearing you speak a little bit when we get the show going. Would you do that?
Sure, absolutely. So one of the I wrote 2 additional books that are not quite about McDuff, but they're kind of about counterintelligence that follow up on the Oswald theme that we had in New Orleans. And one is called The Permindex Ruse, and a lot of Dave Underdown type research and Mark Kulak and Bill Taylor type research went into that, along with Dr. Hamamoto, who was incredible. And then I wrote another one called The Q Loophole, which is about how I believe the Nazis came in under the Q clearance, the Department of Energy Q clearance. So that's out there. And the latest thing I worked on, though, in the last week, and this has really kind of got me, well, really the whole charrette when I was out in California, was Dr. Hamamoto's work with this George Hodel and these Black Dahlia murders and the Zodiac murders and the lipstick murders. So I went to California and met with Steve Hodel, and I was researching all of his stuff. And let me tell you, everything Dr. Hamamoto said is coming in like you cannot believe. I don't want to steal your thunder, doctor, but you
No.
said that the Hollywood had this compromise operation at this Frank Lloyd Wright house. You said John Huston ran it with Motion Picture Unit 1. You said it was up there, at Fort Roach up there in the hills, with the secret Air Force base, this Hollywood propaganda unit. This is the same unit, one that produces Marilyn Monroe and Judith Exner and, Adam Schiff's dad and Spielberg's dad, and just so many, of course, Howard Hughes is involved that, Bob Mayhew's involved in this thing. And it just tied this house that we went and visited that you had talked about with the Black Dahlia, tied everything together with Motion Picture Unit 1. And I can't wait to see your book. I'm writing a book about all the things I stole from you.
Well, George, you must have passed through, on the 405 freeway. You must have passed through Newport Beach and Irvine. Now that is a really undiscovered area that fits right into this whole story here. And it just so happens that I've been doing a couple of, beyond Steve Hodel, a couple of true crime stories. One is the death of a biotech engineer by the name of Bill McLaughlin. And another one that's breaking right now that's dealing with concerns a orthopedic surgeon by the name of Dr. Grant Robineau. And it all says, some people think that Bill Gates is the largest landowner in the country, but the largest landowner in the United States of America is unknown to most of the public. His name is Donald Bren, Bren, and he has a center. He built it with his money. It's the basketball center, but it's a multi-purpose center on the campus of UC Irvine, which is where I got my PhD, by the way. And it was kind of living in the shadow of UCLA in particular. But and this is why I'm mentioning it, George, is because what's been missing is that it's also a center. It's the biotech center. I mean, one of the main streets that goes through there that bisects it is Von Karman Boulevard. It's one of the super streets. And it goes right into the Gold Coast, Newport Beach, Balboa Island. Kobe Bryant lived down there, Dennis Rodman, a lot of stars, but also these biotech entrepreneurs. And this person here, he was the first person in his family to go to college. He went on a full ride at Loyola Marymount University, LMU. Remember Hank Gathers, by the way, who played there?
With heart
Yeah. And so it's Loyola, and he went on a full ride with a quote unquote benefactor, right? But it was there that I think he was being groomed to be put in this position of a biomedical entrepreneur. And one of his inventions was blood purification devices, heavily into blood. And it seems as that what was put in motion in the mid 60s when the UC Irvine campus was founded is leading up to what we're seeing today. This end game that we're facing, this biomedical end game that hopefully we'll be able to avert thanks to your work, George. And by the way, since John is singing your praises, I want to also, because you're too modest to do so yourself, point out the fact that almost a year and a half ago, you were way, because Alex Jones is taking credit for this. He's doing a humble brag routine right now. So I'm calling him out on it. It doesn't help him any when he does like this chinky type talk, and talk about race baiting and racial division, but he's the most guilty proponent of it. But I'm going to just put it out there. It's you, George, that was ahead of the pack and that put it out there. Your research is being confirmed every day. And I'll give you one example. I'm not going to say that word, but it's about these two virologists in Europe that said that what you were talking about comes out of, guess what? Not a ferret's butt, but a laboratory. It's all there. So congratulations.
Yeah, well, and I want to throw it right back to Paul Cottrell, because Paul Cottrell is the one who said, hey, there's 5 HIV inserts in coronavirus, and that ain't never appeared in no coronaviruses before. And I can't remember if it was Enigma Droid or the Mobster or which one of our researchers sent me that.
Yeah.
And I looked at it, and I looked at the paper from India.
Yeah.
And now in the Fauci emails that came out today, they read it. They read this whole thing, you know, of how they created this and inserted these 5 inserts into the thing. And it was all very detailed information. You know, we turned it up to, 40 degrees centigrade, and then we turn it down, and then we spin, culture it. And then we put the phosphorescent protein in there, the GFR in there. So it was, there's no denying Fauci, did this. And this Indian television station had sponsored that. That goes back to January of 2020 when Paul Cottrell, when I didn't even know who Paul Cottrell was. There was this, people on the internet talking about it. And then I got a hold of him, and yeah, sure enough, there's these 5 inserts. Then we got into all the spike protein stuff, and like, there's 4 different ways to get in the cell. We got into that. And so a lot of this stuff hasn't come out yet. So far, where we're at is, Trump just said gain of function today. But Trump said
Trump said it?
Well, he said that Fauci has a lot to answer for in his emails. So yeah. That's what Trump said.
Okay.
But Jim Jordan said gain of function, and Rand Paul has said gain of function, and now we want to bring Fauci back for another round of interviews.
Right, so he can perjure himself some more.
Yeah, I'm just saying this is the cycle that we go through every time, right? Is you have to kind of punch out there, be, out there in front, take the arrows, and then, but eventually it comes around. So it's really kind of cool.
Yeah. And George and John, you're no doubt aware that there's a preprint out by these 2 virologists in Europe, Birger Sørensen and Andres Susrud. Oh, there's 3, and Angus Dalgleish. It's a multinational group of researchers, and that's going to drop on. Well, I guess it has already dropped. It's dated May 26th. I haven't found it yet, but the abstract's out there. It's published, and this really is the damning document. This is like the bow on top of the whole the package here that you've been developing along with other researchers, George. So here it is, and as soon as I get it, I'll forward it to you.
Now, Dalgleish is Daglesh. Is that right? The third researcher?
I got it.
Oh, you got it? Okay.
Oh, you have it? Okay.
You guys have lost your Scottish accents, or else you'd have it too.
Okay.
Angus Dalgleish.
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 DAHLGLI. No, DALGLISH. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. I don't know. Maybe I can't do it either. But anyway, it's Dalgleish is a Scottish name, and I think it's DALGLISH.
Correct.
Name is Angus.
Yes. Right. And they're bona fides, St. George's University of London. Okay, so these are top-ranked researchers. So Dr. Anthony Fauci, Dr. Deborah Birx, as Ricky Ricardo would say, they got a lot of splaining to do.
You got a lot of splaining to do. Yeah, well, I love it when you get the confirmation, and that's a lot of fun.
Oh, I left out an E. There it is. Angus Dalgleish. Thank you, Aaron.
Yeah, and so I'm not familiar with this, Doctor. What's the big bomb drop in this?
Well, the title is A Reconstructed Historical Etiology of the SARS Coronavirus 2 Spike. And they mentioned Wuhan, and they mentioned the possible connection to U.S. laboratories. Where Alex Jones fears to tread, he will not even utter the name Peter Daszak, who is a British subject, as you pointed out. He's a foreign national, but for some reason it's always the Chacoms. But anyway, according to the abstract, it's about 300 words. They mentioned that magic phrase, gain of function. So I suspect that the assistants to Dr. Rand Paul and other congressmen have brought these documents to them and said, this is where we're at right now. And the American public and the world public needs to have a strict accounting of what exactly went down.
Yeah, and your research that you were doing on the Black Dahlia opened up a whole new avenue to Wuhan, and how this may be just a parallel construction now with the $3.7 million. We're always looking for they always admit the straw and then hide the pipeline, right?
Right.
And your work, which was, hey, Dulles sends Hodel over to Wuhan, which is the head of the Nationalist Chinese Army with Chiang Kai-shek, to set up the drug business into Los Angeles and set up the drug business into San Francisco. Dr. Hamamoto talks a lot about that in Servitors of Empire. But what I found was all kinds of pictures of Hodel flying vaccines in and making that the new Unit 731, sort of shaking hands with the the Japanese who were working at Unit 731 and making that the Fort Detrick of China. And that I didn't expect. And
wow, that's a great one, George.
Yeah.
And this is like 1946. This is right after the war.
Yep.
Right after.
The OSS ties to him being the UN Relief Commission there.
Yeah.
He's setting up all these rat lines. It's not just the drugs coming in, which I knew you had said. I knew that with the into Chinatown in San Francisco and Los Angeles, but it's also vaccines going the other way. In the ultimate here we're going to use the oil and we're going to test this stuff. So this is a 75-year rat line. And it's not the rat line didn't just appear in 2015 with Fauci with this gain of function. This has been something that Sanofi Adventis is the Nazi. Well, I don't want to say it's the Nazi arm, but Huxt was split off from the IG Farben family. And remember, there's 24 trials here in Nuremberg doctor's trial, and they all got let go. But Huxt becomes Adventis, and Adventis is the one who becomes the worldwide leader in vaccines. 1946, folks, this association's been going on. The 731 crew over there. And everybody says, well, wait a minute, Mao shut down the drug business. He shut down the drug business in China. He shut down the opium dens in China, but they still flew over the hump out to Europe, the opium out into the United States and into Europe.
And of course, a lot of those operations picked up again right after the war in Vietnam.
Yes.
And they were later transshipped to places like Marseille. And that's when in the American popular culture, we get an awareness of something called the French Connection, correct?
Absolutely.
But there's also a connection here with John's father, Mr. Thomas O'Loughlin. The rat line probably began out in the middle of the Pacific when the OSS showed up on the USS Nashville, and Dulles wanted them to be, maybe if not control it, but to be embedded in MacArthur's operations there too. Because I think they were already thinking, okay, when we win this is what we're going to set up. We're going to replace the French colonial drug slavery trafficking system and the British system. We're just going to continue continuity of agenda of the previous outgoing empires. And of course, Japan wanted that action too. That's why they were there. They were all kind of scrambling for it. And geographically, geopolitically, it's mapped out. When John showed that photo of Shanghai, it was mapped out. The different concessions, the foreign concessions, they were all carved out there in graphic form. So that was going to be the new map of the latter part of the 20th century.
Well, you just dropped the bombshell coming in John's new book, so I'll let John.
I didn't want to give away too much, but when I read that, I said, "Oh yeah, okay, they were getting set."
That's a Nashville big gun that you just fired off. Let John talk about that meeting.
Well, I think it's one of those amazing stories that I just turned up because I happened to read a biography of Wild Bill Donovan. And it was only in that book that this story appeared, but it is footnoted, and I do believe that it's true. But it's very interesting that when I spoke to someone at the MacArthur Museum, actually Jim Zobel, who was going to do a presentation for us on Sunday, And Jim is an expert. He said, I've been studying MacArthur for 30 years and I never heard of this.
Huh.
So I thought, well, maybe this is Donovan just, blowing smoke and it got written down one day. But no, this is, I think this really did happen. But we'll learn more about it, because it's true that Donovan desperately coveted getting his agents into Southeast Asia. He was very aggressive. Donovan had started that even before World War II. He was pushing for it. And when you mention the island, I think you didn't mention Espiritu Santo, but it's worth mentioning, because Espiritu Santo was kind of the refitting R&R island down a little bit to the east of Australia, in one of those island chains. Anyway, it is the legendary island from the movie and book South Pacific. And Michener was there. So he wrote the book with that island in mind. Anyway, the point is that was a place where the Nashville visited a number of times. Most of the ships did. And also, I thought it was just amazing when I saw that Pappy Boyington of the Flying Tigers had a base there as well. So you can make from that whatever you want. But I'm kind of thinking these ratlines, as George just said, may have existed a long time, and the addition of airplanes didn't start something new. It's just that it was a new way of doing the same old thing.
Absolutely. And this is the prophetic moment that you're sitting there with me in task force, and you're giving us free legal advice for the DNC class action suit there in the shadows of George Washington University there that one night, where we're outside the free legal, whatever. I can't remember. You went to a legal seminar on class actions, and you had come over and you'd given me and task force this picture of the Nashville patrolling the Yangtze in Shanghai, where all these concessions are.
It was the flagship of the Yangtze River Patrol.
Yeah.
And that's where my dad left the ship, because after being there for a couple of weeks, he was reassigned to the University of Michigan at Ann Arbor to teach naval tactics to ROTC classes. And bomb disposal techniques too. That was his specialty, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see why? I'm sorry, doctor. Can you see why though you'd want to get McDuff out of there? He's right there with those guns on those foreign concessions, right there at the end of the Yangtze. You go upriver, that's Wuhan, right? So,
yeah. Put him in the classroom.
I didn't know that. I didn't know. Is that right, George? The Yangtze.
Steamships could go all the way up the Yangtze from Shanghai to Wuhan, and that's really the last place that you can get a ship that size up the Yangtze. That's when it becomes mountainous after Wuhan. I think they can get to Chongqing, or it's not called Chongqing anymore. But they can get a little bit farther. But the kind of the Nashville class, no, that's where, and I really believe that's why they put it where they did. That's why they put the drug op where it is, because you won't have to worry about the Nashville sending you any airmail.
Well, that of course, Shanghai is one of the great ports in the world too. Mm-hmm. So, but that the development of the European settlements that were right there along the water there, where all the shipping went on, that of course is the result of colonialism and the exploitation of the Chinese people by the British, Portuguese, and others, but mainly the British. And that exploitation is the root of the troubles that we're having today with opium. It's in particular with the ongoing struggle of the Republic of China on Taiwan to either find a way to make peace or somehow let go of the desire to control China. That is also a part of my dad's career, because the effect of the use of opium by the Nationalist Chinese Army, by Chiang Kai-shek and the Sung family, as Professor Hamamoto has detailed so well in his book, that connection taints us today. The idea, and here's I think a very simple concept for people to think about. What if there is no currency? Okay, like right here in early Maryland, there was no money. Nobody had any coins. Nobody had any banknotes. There was nothing. So only currency you had was the crops that you grew. And so you took the tobacco and you stuffed it into these great big casks, and then you hooked them up to your horses and you rolled them down to the port, just like the Bund in Shanghai. And you go down to, it doesn't have to be a big port, it can just be a little landing, but that's the only money you got. In exchange for that, you get your furniture and your nice clothes and your spinet piano, if you have enough tobacco to buy it with. But now transfer that to China in World War II. They didn't have any money either. And they used opium as money, and the Detachment 101, I think it was, that got paid, or one of those secret army in China, it's written down that they were paid with 5-pound bags of opium. Why? Because they didn't have any money. The army didn't have any money. That's what Chiang Kai-shek ran on, was opium. That's what Vang Pao in Laos ran on, was opium. That's what Li Mi in Burma ran on, was opium. They didn't have any money. Opium was money. So my analogy to what happened in early Maryland can maybe explain the attitude of a Chiang Kai-shek that might not have been an opium user himself, but had to finance his army somehow, and the darn stuff was quite valuable. Still is. So that's a completely different way to look at opium from the way that we in the West look at opium. When we talk about opium with our students or kids, it's bad, it's awful, it's heroin, it's addictive, don't do it. But that doesn't mean that everybody that sold, that did business by trading a stick of opium instead of a $10 bill was a bad person, especially in World War II, because they needed to do commerce. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I think the easiest way of controlling a population is just to criminalize an old practice, right? The commercial practices or cultural practice like that. In the same way that the white shoe boys, let's say the Anglo-Protestant elite, criminalized alcohol and pubs so that they could marginalize and criminalize Irish American immigrants, right? That's what Prohibition was really about. And it came to mind because, John, I don't want to give away too much, but one of your grandparents was a publican, right? He had a bar, a saloon. So I immediately thought, wow, that's very much in the Kennedy mold too. Right.
Yeah. My great grandfather, by the same name as me, John J. O'Loughlin, was a saloon owner and saloon keeper on Main Street in Hartford, right across from the Colt, or not, but down the street from the Colt Arms factory where so many people worked at the time. So, you'd think he had a pretty good business, but guess what? Prohibition came along.
He was criminalized.
And how did they deal with it? Well, that's a long story. Connecticut took a completely different attitude towards prohibition than most of the country. They kind of thought, well, we don't like this idea. We're going to kind of ignore the law and just go on doing what we want to do. At least in many cases, it wasn't necessarily illegal. Maybe on a federal level, but then, in other words, the people of Connecticut were probably a little different from the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant majority that would have enforced the prohibition. But then I don't know that much about it. I should shut up.
Well, it was the pubs and it was the saloons where the men of voting age, mostly immigrant people, would organize themselves politically.
Okay.
Just like in revolutionary France, they used to get together in the cafes, right?
Mhm.
And guess what we're being kept out of right now in 2020 and 2021?
The
We're
pub.
stuck in our houses,
Mhm.
except we're breaking the barricade and the embargo by courtesy of StreamYard.
Yes.
That's true.
And
You know,
Aaron Adler, our fabulous producer. Thank you,
Yes,
Aaron.
thank you, Aaron.
I
Thank
never
you,
thought
Andy.
of this. I never thought of this before, but that whole Donovan story on the decks of the Nashville and the I thought I'd seen that somewhere before in another book, but maybe not. But I think that happened, and the end around here around MacArthur and his Nashville going up the Yangtze with the Yangtze Patrol is Wuhan, right? You can't get any further up with the battleship, so that's
Mhm.
the end of our MacArthur's effective reach. And
Mhm.
here we are in Wuhan. And it's interesting, that's also where you would do your bioweapons, right? That are illegal. If you had this
Mhm.
back channel from the Nazis coming out of you need an opium, product, to
Mhm.
you need to make money while
Mhm.
you're getting your bioweapons going. And Huxt is that company. So I just love the Dr. Hamamoto kind of working theory that I went into California with, and all the things I came out with, and it put a lot of the, I think there was somebody in your family, John, that was the second husband that ended up being an Air Force guy that flew the hump in Burma. I mean, it's just like,
Yeah. Lieutenant Colonel Francis Coakley was his name.
Right, the
And
Coakleys.
yeah, and he's my grandmother's really the love of her life. He was her husband for the second half of her life, and she had to take care of him after he came back from the war because he had gotten something into his lungs that gave him emphysema.
Yeah. It sounded like gas, some kind of poisonous gas that he might have inhaled. I don't know. But George, I don't know if you read lately. I can't remember the report. I have it on file somewhere, but supposedly Wuhan is also the largest center of point of origin. I don't know if they actually meant it might be a transshipment point, but Wuhan supposedly, reportedly, is the site where most of the fentanyl is coming from in the world. The world supply comes out of Wuhan.
yeah, I think,
Did you read that somewhere?
yeah. And Hodel even talks about it being sort of the Chicago of China, because
Mhm.
that's where the actual machinery was, and whole factories were moved from Wuhan as the Japanese moved into China and moved up in the hill, and then they were brought back down the Yangtze and reassembled there in Wuhan. Hodel tells the story. So I definitely think that's where your manufacturing was. And again, they're in the middle of a civil war after the war is over. So the it's sort of like with the Russians, with us, they become the enemies. The Japanese become the ally of the nationalist Chinese against Mao. And that whole battle going on, they're like, hey, no more foreign invaders. Mao's saying, get out with the nationalism. And then they're trying to hold on to half of China with Chiang Kai-shek. And this explains Hodel's going to the Philippines. When they're finally booted out, they have no more growing area, and they have Taiwan as an aircraft carrier for the nationalist army, but they don't have the oil and the resources and the growing area. And they go, and Hodel goes to Philippines. So I love these things because they're just labors of love, because you go in here, you learn all this stuff, and say, oh, Hamamoto is right. He wrote the book.
Now, George, what I was implying was that not only was Wuhan that site for drug manufacturing back in the day, in that case, opium and opium derivatives, but I'm referring to in 2021 now, fentanyl,
Yes.
opioids.
Yes.
Yeah, there's some reports saying that is the largest site, right? And just as they're being pointed to as being the point of origin for these man-made viruses, the same way with fentanyl coming out of Wuhan. And the reason I mention this, I've been reading a lot of JAMA articles, the Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA Psych, especially the psychiatric wing of the Journal of American Medicine. And here's the kicker, ladies and gentlemen. According to this article, this is an advocacy article written by a Dr. Thomas R. Costin. He's from the Department of Psychiatry, Baylor College of Medicine, Houston, Texas. Co-written by Isamine Petrakis, medical doctor, Yale Medical University School of Medicine. Right there's your opium connection right there. But guess what these two people are advocating? They're advocating a vaccine as an intervention, this is their phrase, an anti-fentanyl vaccine, which supposedly, reading from their article, blocks lethal fentanyl doses in animals. So they, again, another vaccine solution or pseudo solution to a problem that was invented by these global banking families.
Yeah, the dopamine receptor, and we found these doctors murdered in Fort Belvoir, who could have been whistleblowers. You know, we have this investigation going on. Where did the virus start, right? And you know, Sanofi Adventis, okay, and the Muriot family, Alain Muriot, built the BSL-4 laboratory in Wuhan. Okay, people say, well, show me the evidence that there's a connection between Sanofi Adventis, the biggest vaccine maker in the world, and the Wuhan lab where the lab leak is. Show me the connection. Well, how about they built it? You know?
Yeah.
And this is the Iris Chang thing that you were working on, which is the postulate was they killed Iris Chang for a damn good reason. She wrote about Nanjing. And in that, talking about that torture, she got into the Unit 731. And where did the Unit 731 library go? Where did they go? You're a bunch of Japanese guys that have been displaced. You can't go back to Japan. They went to Wuhan.
Right. And Nanjing or Wuhan is right upriver from Nanjing.
Right.
So if she's a historian of any sort of worth, she's going to make that connection by and by. So she knew too much.
And guess where there's been a new breakout of another HN type avian virus in China for the first time? The H10N3. And you don't think the Erasmus lab can deal an avian flu at you that you've never seen before? Sit back, and it's right by Nanjing. And that's where the Eastern Theater Command is. China has sort of a polygon, a set of fronts, the way they defend their country, and then they have a command in the middle, basically, sort of their last stand area.
That's the turtle formation.
The turtle formation, and the Eastern Command is in Nanjing. And that's where we have IP addresses going back to 2016 with our couriers. So it would make total sense that Peter Strzok was making moves potentially to unleash the insurance policy in 2016 to do the exact same thing, have the capital taken, this time not by same guys, same Ukrainian guys. They wouldn't be wearing MAGA shirts, though. They would be wearing, you know, freedom and election shirts and maybe BLM shirts, and then take the government that way. This all could have been, this 2020 thing that we saw, 2021, could have been just a reversal of the same thing that Strzok was talking about with the insurance policy in 2016.
Mm-hmm. George, speaking of the takeover on that fateful day that you were in attendance, January 6, 2021, I was thinking from some reading I've been doing about the occultic nature of these types of political gatherings, inaugurations, and whatnot. But could the orange symbolize not just the clockwork orange, or the Orange Revolution, right, in the Ukraine and the color revolutions, but even further back, might it not represent the House of Orange?
Oh yeah, yeah.
That's related to, you know, the Netherlands and of course the British throne.
Absolutely,
I'm down with that. Yeah, I think you're right.
And Task Force Orange is at Fort Belvoir, right? Task Force Orange is at Fort Belvoir. Agent Orange comes from the same Fort Belvoir clade of people there in the Intel Command. I stood on the Potomac with Task Force in the old at Fort Washington with McDuff, looking over, and he told me about the Fort Hunt Agreement, where those Nazis originally implanted themselves on the other side of the Potomac, not far from Mount Vernon. And I'm telling you, I think this is the Q loophole. And it was the first place in America that had a reactor, a portable reactor. That was Bill Taylor's dad. And that's where all of the Nazis were interviewed by the Ritchie boys up in Maryland. They came down there, and the Jewish translators could speak German and English, and all the files, this is why I say it's the 68,000 McDuff files, are stored there for about a year. Then they destroy Fort Hunt is leveled, right? So then where do you take them, right? Where's the next fort that you can get to in Virginia? And the next fort is Fort Belvoir. That's why you have all the Nazi art there. So, and I'm not saying Fort
that
Ritchie.
makes a lot of sense, George. I tell you, it really is shocking that they just bulldozed all the buildings. They had built these nice places for these, the German generals, to live while they were there, supposedly, being debriefed and doing things for us. But no, they were there to solidify a handshake deal, and somewhere standing back behind, way back behind the last curtain, was the Wall Street banks that had started the whole thing in the first place.
Now, the question I have, George, is, are those documents truly lost? Are they gone?
No, because Fort Ritchie was where the interrogators came from. They came down from Maryland up there in the not far from where Battle of not Shiloh, but what was the battle up there? Tell me what the battle in Maryland was. All of a sudden, I'm forgetting it.
Antietam.
Antietam, thank you. Because Sharpsburg, they call it in the southern. But anyway, they came down from Fort Ritchie. That's where the Kissinger's Ritchie boys were. And they came down and interviewed all the Nazis for their war secrets. They also leveled and closed Fort Ritchie. And where did it go? Camp David. So if I'm looking, and of course, not only Camp David, but the Raven Rock facility, or Rock Raven, is there. And who is up there? What Nazis up there? Schmitz with Rock Raven and Keith Kellogg. So if I was guessing on where the 68,000 files are, if they still exist, I mean, they could have microfilmed them by now and turned them into a dot at the end of some sentence in some document. But I would guess that they went at some point from Fort Ritchie to Rock Raven. Because when you go to Rock Raven, you go Q level clearance. You remember when at the cover of the book that I wrote about McDuff, the color version, where he's got this civil defense?
Yes.
Continuity of government.
Mm-hmm.
Very few people had that level of clearance. And that allows you to store it at a place like Mount Weather or Rock Raven, and nobody can get to it. And it's lost to history. So the Q loophole.
No, the reason I ask is that the documents that author Steve Hodel was looking for, he thought that they were lost to the ages, but the criminal division of the LAPD had thrown them away. But the district attorney's office had been running their own investigation. Then they had identical set of those documents that they hanged on to, and he was able to access them. And through that, he was able to reconstruct more fully his father's and his associates, the people related to him, in a more complete fashion. That's why I think the search for documents needs to continue. I don't think it's ever over until, well, it's never really over. It could find its way. I mean, the book about MK Ultra or mind control, the Marx book, that was reconstructed from documents. Most of them were thrown away, but there was a duplicate set someone had set in the hallway or something, and they just sort of through serendipity had found it, and he was able to reconstruct. And this is a classic foundational book, In Search of the Manchurian Candidate. So I'm always hoping, for the buried treasure to surface at some point, at least to look for it. That helps.
Don't think I don't believe in buried treasure. I mean, I definitely believe, you mentioned Helms destroying the MK Ultra, and then they forgot a whole set, right? This is where I know Doug Valentine disagrees with this, but a key part of the Nazi kind of compromise operations in America, especially with the ones we were looking at in LA, is co-opting these young women. You know, this Jeff Epstein model where they're 13, 14 years old, that type of thing. And that really rubbed Colby the wrong way. And it really rubbed John DeCamp the wrong way. John DeCamp is the whistleblower for the whole operation at the Franklin scandal. That's why they're sitting there in Mystery Island talking about how do we remain alive. So if there's any conspirators bringing documents and, you know, using these Nazi compromises, it's going to be right there at that table. And 2 weeks later, Colby's dead, right? He dies in the canoe, right? Not far from where John's sitting right now. And so my theory, why does Colby buy this little house down there? You know, and I spent a lot of time there looking at it. Why is he going out in this canoe? And why is he going out to this little church at night? Right. And I'm thinking, man, that's one armload of documents. And then somebody like the camp is picking them up and they're going to have the files. And if it didn't happen, it's good to put the fear of God in them that it did. So now they really have to do some backpedaling. But why is Colby doing this ritual at night, at dusk, at night, going out in a canoe at night to the church? Does he really need to pray by canoe? You know, it's just ask the question. And we know that the camp is there talking about children being exploited, and Colby's dead a week later, or body's discovered 2 weeks later. But see, that's where I say follow the blood stains. Because if you follow the blood stains, it's something Colby was doing, and all of his skeleton of secrets. You know, he was putting out all these secrets and doing his absolution at the end of his life. Mm-hmm. That's the one thing where he thought he could get killed.
Well, Colby was a devout Catholic, Roman Catholic. Yeah, he was a believer, and that belief was misplaced because he thought that the agency he was working for was trying to rid the world of evil. I mean, he had that sense of righteousness, and as it turned out, it came back and doubled back on him, and might have ended his life. It probably did.
Yeah, John and I have stood there looking across at Colby's place. I can't count how many times, and it's a good reminder visually because you keep working it in your mind constantly, saying, "Oh no, what would he have done? What would I have done?" Just being there physically really helps.
Mm-hmm. Now, is this a church or a chapel?
John, it's a little tiny.
It's a church. It looks like a church, and they do have masses there.
Okay.
Not regular. I think they do it sometimes, and the local folks here really like it. It's very popular with the folks here on Mystery Island.
One lead I've never followed up on, John, is supposedly the 6 or 7 or 8 Bang Pow special operators.
I didn't either.
Yeah, that became fishermen. I ask everybody, do you remember the guys that all disappeared when Colby died? The fishing crew. But I thought, wow, what a great place to meet your operatives. If you were trying to get files out of there, meet at church and have, this midnight mass or the whatever, 8 p.m. after sunset mass as a potential cover. But anyway, everyone's down there at Cobb Island. They can go look at it and who knows?
Yeah. But it's a mystery that's not yet been solved. And I think it's good to keep talking it up because like everything else, we need answers. I'm looking for answers in the case of my father's early demise. I see an awful lot of circumstantial evidence that points me in certain directions, but I'm not an expert in all the fields it would take to, solidify these inferences that I can make. So I'm going cautious but I'm also going, firmly forward with my dad's story. And I think the book is going to open people's minds as to what we've been talking about tonight in the personal way, to have encountered, the wrath of an Alan Dulles, of a Richard Bissell, of, people that are, eating people alive for lunch, for Christ's sake. These are insane, maniacal murderers, and they are running our intelligence service. When my dad is still, trying desperately to do the right thing. It's quite a predicament, and it's been quite a mixed blessing trying to write this book, because it stirs up a lot, I'll tell you.
Well, one of the leads I've been following, and this comes right from the Dr. Hamamoto, talking about Mayhew running this operation, selling the Nazi art, Hodel selling the Nazi art to try to get placements in the oil industry in Southern California. But Mayhew actually started up in Long Island, and he was putting the weapons teams from the fleeing diaspora of Nazis into these places that we think of as the Russian retreats, but they're actually the DuPont Rockefeller retreats. So he put the Wagner glide bomber team into one of the things, and he was putting these different teams. And once they get placed, they leave the temporary safe house and go off to Bell Helicopter, or go off to Lockheed, or wherever they're going to go. Right. And then you bring in the next crew. So I've been really looking at Mayhew big time. Mm-hmm. And his operation on Long Island, and going to the National Archives, I had seen where there was these sub chasers, at the end of Long Island off of Montauk, and then going back to the Task Forces Island there, Block Island was one of the disembarkation points, and then they had the ferries then coming in, and there's Port Jefferson there that has a ferry directly into Manhattan from there. After you teach the person how to, say gee whiz a lot and Betty Boop and, all that, don't say Heil Hitler anymore. You have to have a little finishing school out there. You know what I mean? In the Rockefeller and DuPont retreats. So all these places we went thinking that it was somehow connected to Trump and Russia actually are these old Nazi haunts that Mayhew had. Right, in rinsing these Nazis, and it's just been a beautiful journey here, and I'm glad to be on it with you guys.
Wonderful. Now, George, I just want to ask you. You mentioned DeCamp. You met John DeCamp?
Met John DeCamp. Yeah.
Okay, just to clarify, I just wanted to, because he was an attorney by training, and he had an office until very recently. Because I tried to contact him a couple of years ago. A person like that has elaborate files. So if indeed William Colby was passing him documents, then there is a possibility that if John DeCamp left some papers, professional or otherwise, or personal correspondence, let's say with the University of Nebraska, that would be worth looking at. Just kind of sifting through it. You never know what you'd find. Because, I don't know, John, you probably had an elaborate file case yourself, right? And paperwork.
Oh my, what I have in my office room there, I've got a lateral file, a beautiful mahogany lateral file that is built to handle legal size paper, legal size files. So it's completely useless as designed, but it is still there, and it's a very nice piece of furniture, and I just use it to store things in. Yeah, absolutely. I at one time had at least a dozen file cabinets, and that, of course, that was back when we had everything on paper. It reminds me of my dad, though. One of the things that if my dad were suddenly transported here into our time, and he'd understand computers, he'd say, "Wow, that's really amazing what you guys have done with these computers." But he'd still be wondering where the file cabinets are. He'd say, "Where's the file cabinets?" But you don't have the paper? You mean you don't actually have the documents? All you've got is on that computer there, and that computer is nothing but a whole bunch of zeros and ones and zeros and ones, and you're saying that you've completely lost control of the actual original text. Well, actually, yeah, that's what we're saying. Yeah, we just let it go. All over the past 40 years, we just decided it's too much trouble to have a file cabinet. I could put a TV there. I don't need that file cabinet anymore. So he would be astonished, and he would be so angry, because that's the whole point of security, is to have the original, to secure it properly, and to know what the facts are. Like look at the paperclip files, as George and I have talked about many times, where you get a ruling that says that so and so is a Nazi, and then somebody comes in, puts a little mark and says not.
With the red pen.
And that's what goes into the final thing. It says he's not a Nazi.
Yeah.
Well,
or you could use whiteout and just white out the word white before Russian, and so it doesn't look like a Morin-shelled Russian anymore. It's just a Russian, right?
That's exactly what I think would drive him nuts. He'd say, how can you do this? You've given up all hope of restoring the actual original of important stuff. So that's just one thing about my dad. He was very, very much into accurate filing systems.
Yeah. Well, I just want to put two more plugs out for two of our other authors, which is one is Mark Kulak and the other is Bill Taylor, because Bill Taylor talks about the Monmouth funnel, the rinse, these Q level clearance Nazis coming in for the, we have the Rosenberg sort of the cover story for the Fort Monmouth where they were, but all these people, if I get you a Q clearance, now the FBI can't look at it. Now McDuff can't look at it, because McDuff's collating all the other files. Q clearance, here it goes. Q clearance is the only Department of Energy clearance. It's the only thing McDuff couldn't get his hands on. There's the book.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one is Mark Kulak talking about Plum Island, another Q clearance level thing. Anything doing with bioweapons, Q clearance. And Plum Island, now Manhattan, Kansas, Manhattan Project, anyone? Those are going to be the places where we're going to find the files. Fort Detrick, Fort Belvoir, Gibson Island, Fort Monmouth, Plum Island, Long Island, that whole thing. That's where we're going to find these files, and the national laboratories, the people coming into the national labs, right? Brookhaven on Long Island, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. Bruce Orr's dad, Oak Ridge, this is a labor of love, because every day that goes by, we get another break, and it's so much fun, and they keep destroying, but we're catching up faster than they're destroying.
Thanks, George. Bill Taylor's book, I haven't got it yet. Hold it up again so people can see it. Deep State Death by Braided Bathrobe Belt, by Bill Taylor. Excellent. That braided bathroom belt, of course, it was around the neck of James Forrestal, the first Secretary of Defense, when he was found after his untimely decision to jump out of a window, or possibly otherwise.
It's a great book, and he talks about all your favorites. It's very well illustrated. This will be the size when we print McDuff's book. This will be the size. It'll be the 8x10 size, which is a workbook size, which gives you really a lot of latitude in margin notes and a lot of latitude in size of graphics. And when you do the diagrams, you can really read the diagrams when you go to this bigger format. So I'm really looking forward to printing the McDuff book. And we're going to have a whole wall here, John. We're going to have a whole wall of McDuff and a whole wall of Chris Milligan. And we're going to have a wall of Hamamoto here in this studio. And we can't wait.
And all the Doug Valentines, you got to have every single one of his books.
It's going to be a Trine Day worship center, but there's going to be a whole, like McDuff shelf and a Hopsiker shelf and all these people that have been a part of,
All right.
and we'll see what happens. Maybe a Bill Taylor shelf too.
And I just wanted to also emphasize what you said about Mark Kulak's work. Folks at Housatonic ITS or Housatonic Live on YouTube. Catch up with Mark. He's doing amazing work. So another fabulous researcher that I've gotten to know through the Osprey team. So thanks everybody for being with us tonight. Professor Hamamoto, been fabulous. And George Webb, I look forward to seeing you in a day or so. And thanks very much, everybody. And we'll be talking at you sometime tomorrow. I'll know more about it when tomorrow happens.
Good night, gentlemen.
Thanks,
bye, folks.